We're on. This is Journey of an Aesthete podcast, and we're blessed, honored to have one of the major American filmmakers live streaming now, Mr. Andrew Bujalski, who has been on the show once before in 2019, before the pandemic. But he has a new film out, a terrific film, in some ways in keeping with his work overall, very continuous, in other ways a departure technologically post-pandemic. It's called There. It's hot off the presses. It's on DVD. Get it? So welcome to our show, Andrew, and it's great after so many years to see you.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you.
I don't know where to begin. Did you want to begin talking about the new film or you know,
whatever you prefer, but we might as well. Shall I describe it, or what? How would you like to start?
Well, I was lucky to watch it on my TV, and stream it, which is a contemporary way to see things, right? Sure. That's very much what everybody's doing now. But you're releasing it physically on Valentine's Day, right?
Yep.
And I feel that that's really, really smart choice. And but I just wanted to say, I'll talk for it. I won't go over long, but just as a viewer watching it in my home, the intimacy of the film you created matched perfectly the viewing experience I had. So again, I haven't thought at all really about theater or not theater or home, but it feels almost as if you made this film with at least one eye tuned to that kind of viewing experience of the intimacy on the couch or the sofa. That's part of it. Of course, certainly not all of it, but there is that in the way you frame the characters. But I was really impressed by a number of things. Of course, the performances are remarkable. Lily Taylor, Jason Schwartzman, this newcomer I don't know, who a couple of people I don't know, the sponsor, the one who's a sponsor, and the man that's striking up the bartender. Really just terrific performances, and the writing, as usual, is strong. But I did feel watching it that there's newer, more contemporary things in this story and in this film about things going on now with technology or with legal matters or parenting or sexuality, right? All these things are kind of really to the fore in this film. We felt they were to the fore. But I talk too much. Talk about the genesis of this and how you came to make this film.
Well, it's a very, extremely peculiar movie and definitely a kind of grand leap off the cliff experiment. So, it's something that, we made it in a way that, I'd certainly never made anything, and I don't know if anybody had ever made anything. I got interested in this idea that, there's always, there's always a kind of lie in editing or a lie that tells the truth. There's
right.
And there is, as you say, ellipsis, like every edit is an ellipsis. You're kind of jumping in space and time and trying to stitch these things together. So I was, and of course, this was something I started to think about a lot during early pandemic days when there was a period of about 3 months when nobody could make a movie anywhere. And then people gradually started to kind of come back and build their bubble, all these things.
Hold that thought. I wanted to mention the musical instruments. Of course, as a musician, I was very taken with the bass clarinet and all that, but we'll get back to that. Just remind me.
Yeah, of course. So, just thinking about both kind of what's already there anytime you make a movie, this fakery of the edit, and then what we were going through at that time that were, just this crazy idea of like, well, how do you, if people can't be in a room together, then how do you do what we do? And I got excited about the idea of like, well, maybe the answer is kind of right in front of us. Maybe we do. I can shoot a scene with two people looking each other in the eye, and they can be 1,000 miles apart from each other. And so that's exactly what
that's the genesis.
But I built the whole screenplay around that because I thought, let's make this and let's create this illusion, but also let's lay the illusion bare. So, we shot people, thousands of them. No two people ever appear in the same shot.
That's right.
They are never within 1,000 miles of each other. And I wrote something. I knew it was going to be bizarre to make a movie that's about distance, but also about connecting across distance, or the struggle to connect across
Well,
distance.
hold that thought. I had a question. Of course, there's a bar scene at the end where you do have, right, physical proximity. Am I right? I mean,
no, those are three different bars. You know, that's a bar in Texas, a bar in Los Angeles, and a little bit of a bar in Italy.
Huh. But you're creating the illusion. Well, you could talk about it. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
You're creating a different feeling in the viewer.
Sure. Well, you know, there's little, and there would be little visual things to try to tie spaces together, but it always is remarkable to me.
Yeah.
You know, how much the mind wants to stitch these spaces together. Right. But I think if you go and look at it again, Mitch, you'll see like there are very clear differences between the bar behind him and the bar behind her, and yet we kind of don't want to process that.
Right.
And that's kind of what the movie was all about, in a way, was about this that cognitive dissonance, that feeling. Right. Here we are in a very intimate space.
Well, clearly these characters are having arguments and conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think your film is using the physical distance, but in a way, you're saying that our mind is creating a proximity that's not there, right? So,
of course.
And you say, of course, but what's your feeling about that artistically in terms of, if we do that, is that okay? Or in other words, there's of course that postmodern thing of the awareness of the illusion. And I sort of feel like your film isn't really that. It isn't. It's actually, it's a little more intimate than that. I'm trying to choose my words carefully. I feel like it's a film about love and relationships, much like your other work, much like Mutual Appreciation or Beeswax or Support the Girls. And that's the core of this new film, mm-hmm. right? But within the environment of our changed world. So am I right? I think you're trying to find some kind of balance is the word, or some, what's your thought about that? Or
yeah. I mean, it's a unique, you know, everything kind of followed from form. Once I started to get excited about this particular weird way of working, this weird form, all the story then came from that. So it of course it's still about the things that I think my movies are always about. Yeah. And yet it had to be a very different feeling, because, you know, and it made me appreciate how much, when you do make a more conventional kind of movie, you're so much rooted in time and space that, you know, there's something that's kind of very important to the movie making process about
unity of time and space.
Yeah. Going somewhere and saying, this is where we, even if it's just, even if you're just, you know, shooting in your front yard and you're saying, well, okay, it's 2023 and I'm in Austin, Texas. Like wherever you root yourself, it becomes very important to the movie. And every time I've shot a movie, and even when you're making a period piece, in a way, you know, when we did Computer Chess, which is a period piece, you're still kind of,
love that movie.
Thank you. You're still rooting in wherever you are, and then kind of trying to build your time tunnel. And this was a movie where we weren't. I mean, it kind of takes place in limbo, and so I had to write for limbo. But it's also a feeling, I think, that we're all especially in. You know, especially these days, and especially in pandemic era, like we're all very familiar with that feeling of rootlessness.
Well, it's all the more interesting, though, that in my feeling in this film, you have so many contemporary things. I mean, there's explicit, I don't know if the word is jargon, there's language coming from the recovery movement a lot in this film.
Yeah.
Then you have a sponsor, and some of this stuff is a little went over my head. Of course, I'm used to that in your films. You put things in your films that sometimes go over my head that are specific to the people. And there's a sense in which I'm learning about, there's a sense of compassion. I'm learning about these people, but I may have to ask you some informational questions about, you know, well, what did this kid do? He put something on the internet and all this. I don't know. It's weird.
Sure.
And she has a very strong, she's very harsh about this man this woman dated, right? And that's part of, I guess, doing the right thing and having healthy relationships and all that, right? But then you discovered this character has her own problems when she's a parent.
For sure.
Fighting with that teacher and that talk. So I don't know if it's too early to jump to that, but again, there's a lot of psychological, sociological content in this film that feels like, feels really rich and feels really almost relevant to what people are experiencing now, pandemic or no pandemic. And so it's interesting that you're talking about reverse shot, just one shot of the bar, behind the barn, sort of the formal properties of that. But yet, again, I've said this before, broken record. I feel like there's a real strong regard for things going on in people's lives. And so talk about a little about that, the acting and just how you managed to get that in there. And so in and despite the pandemic or with the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I certainly, I credit the performers for the richness of those characters, because that was this, as usual, the movie kind of lives and dies by performance. So, it was, as a writer, it was a bit of a high wire act, because I'm essentially writing a series of, very strange 15-minute plays. And we have to approach them that way. And it was a huge lift for the actors. It's the hardest thing I've ever asked an actor to do. And, I asked 8 actors to do it. Yeah, because it's, it is these, well, first of all, and to clarify this as well, they were thousands of miles away from their scene partner. They were also thousands of miles away, often from me. Myself and most of the core crew was doing this, was on Zoom. So they would be in a room with, a kind of micro crew of maybe 2 people. I think the maximum was 4 ever. So it really was nothing like a conventional shoot. They didn't have, and the camera was always on them, and they were just having to drill these 15-minute scenes over and over and over again. It was pretty grueling. And without that sense of, without being able to look to
the next door person.
Yeah.
So it's the complete absence of the proximity of a crew or people in the same room. See, that fascinates me, because I was watching the film and I've seen it twice now, and I was mindful of this formal conceit, if you will, of the pandemic. But I was also mindful of, again, there's just something. It's almost like those, if there are restrictions or those constraints, made these other things flower more. In other words, it's sort of interesting, made sort of something about human relationships in quote unquote ordinary time.
Yeah.
More powerful in a way. I don't know. It's just a thought. I don't know what you.
Well, I think that's what we're doing. It's like the more we push people apart, the more they have to reach toward each other. I think that was a lot of what the movie was about, was about trying to, they're strained intimacies, but intimacies nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, it's we'll keep talking, because it's interesting to me, just these actors and Lili Taylor and this.
And my other thought, and I certainly feel it so much in that first scene, is that so much of what an actor does anyway is project a kind of fantasy, even if the people are in the same room, and even if you have all kinds of verisimilitude on the set, and even if they can roam around the set, there's still this sense that they have to work from imagination. They have to imagine that Lili Taylor has to imagine that she is not Lili Taylor, the actor showing up for work, but that she is whoever this person is, and with whatever relationship she has. So, we kind of push that to an extreme where we deny her the scene partner, and we deny her half of the scene. But in a way, she's still doing the same work, and maybe working all the harder to imagine this person on the other end. And there's something very magical and exciting to me about watching Lili Taylor imagine this man, and then I cut to her imagination, and then I watched Lenny imagine his way back to her. It's
brilliant for you to release it on Valentine's Day, I must say, because
well, that's the doing of our distributor, but bless them. And it is, it's funny because it starts there's certainly elements of romance in it, but it's, it ain't your conventional rom-com.
No, it's not a rom-com, but it has the I feel there's a I don't know if sweetness is the word, but there's a compassion in it.
Yeah.
That delivers to an audience what they would get from a rom-com, actually.
Right. Well, it's dark too. I mean, it's a difficult movie for sure.
Oh, it's dark. Well, we could talk about. I mean, so did you, when you were writing it, were you thinking about, I want to cover this things going on in classrooms or kids doing this violation? I don't know. Again, a lot of it was over my head because I'm not a parent and I don't go to PTA meetings, so maybe I'm not the ideal audience for the film. I don't know, but talk about you coming up with these ideas about what's going on, the legal stuff, the lawyers struggling with his, just whatever comes to your mind when you're thinking about these issues in society and putting them in the
You know, well, it started with the relationship once because I knew once I had the structure,
right,
and I knew I wanted to I wanted this all to be these strained intimacies. You know, it became kind of variations on a theme, and things started to grow out of that. What's the feeling I can get from this process? And you know, I'd never done it this way before.
right,
Nobody had. So I was trying to imagine my way into it, but I was thinking about relationships that need trust to survive. And so,
yes,
you know, of course there's the romantic relationship,
right,
but also, you know, parent teacher. As a parent, there's something very it's a very peculiar relationship, because, you know, as I speak to you now, my kids are in school
right.
and they're with their teachers all day. It's a
Wow,
huge chunk of their lives
it is.
that I know so little about, because I'm not there. Uh, so it is always a little peculiar when you come face to face with the teacher and you think, you know,
Oh,
you
one of the things that I found brilliant about your film is the surprise of the viewer's expectations. This person is a sponsor, right? As some
yeah,
kind of recovery sponsor, and yet in this other context, they're not so well. So they're far from very imperfect, and there's a so that's
sure.
very very clever on your part to show these different sides of this person. You know, how to evaluation and ethical
Yeah,
evaluation. One of the
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's certainly a complex character. It's a and so yeah, this woman who is an AA sponsor. You meet her again in a different context in which she kind of tearing someone apart.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, and I talked a lot about this with the actor. I talked a lot about it with various. You know, I as we were speaking of earlier, I'm not in recovery myself, but I do have plenty of friends who are in that program. And the more I've gotten to learn about, you know, AA and related
Right.
programs over the years, the more I am kind of in awe of it. It's
Oh
sort
yeah.
of miraculous what they do there.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Um,
Well, there's the wisdom of it, and in the fact that it really sometimes saves lives. I mean, in terms of, I mean,
I
saving
think frequently saves lives. Absolutely, it's kind
frequently
of the
saves lives. Um, and that, so I guess that's the way you include that in this film without making the film be about that. See, that's a writing thing. That's an impressive thing to me, because I feel like that's you're honoring that, but you're also using it as this kind of launching pad for these other things. It's just very exciting. Another
yeah,
reason to get the film, but you, of course, you talk to the actors about it, and then of course that person who was the teacher, you see her from the beginning, the end. So all the characters connect. It is like a play. It is like a great 3-act play or something, or 2-act play on film. Yeah, it has that said tightness of construction. It's far from, yeah, yeah,
yeah. Well, so I think, you know, screenwriting is kind of nothing but structure.
yeah,
And I don't know what a story is until I know how it's built, and then usually it falls into place. But it's uh, yeah, you know, my wife is a novelist, and she has to
yeah.
make magic out of the words, but that's not my beat. My beat is just trying to build a, you know, girding and places to put things, and then you go and get a crew and they make it magic.
Well, I'd love to have her on the podcast. As you know, I wanted to
Sure.
talk about all the houses and
Yeah.
her Simone Vale. I mean, that's a whole other topic that I'd love to
Sure.
get into. But she's a fine novelist, and it's interesting that you. Well, that makes me wonder: do you discuss these kinds of things as in terms of never having married a creative person like that? I don't know what that. I'm sure that must come up, right? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe you just talk to your kids, or I don't know.
Well, we talk plenty about our struggles. You know, we share our miseries all the time.
Okay.
That's the danger of two creative people marrying, is that, you know, instead of just purely being supportive,
Yeah.
you know, she'll say I'm miserable, and I'll say, oh, me too. And we just, you know, compete over our miseries.
Well, how remarkable you made this film in this pandemic using those rules, almost like Dogma 95.
Yeah,
Almost
yeah,
Dogma 95 on steroids, or on
right.
kind of and yet it's almost like a whole way of making a movie. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, we invented some. I mean, it was the first of its kind, and I suspect it'll be the last of its kind. It's not.
Oh,
It's not. Although I'd be thrilled if anybody else tried it.
interesting.
But and well, the funny thing, the movie is quite modular. I always like the idea that, and we thought about, it was kind of a little too much work for us to bother to do, but I thought about making alternate sound mixes available, because one thing about this movie is, if there's 8 performers in there, if you don't like one of them, you can sub it out. You can go shoot yourself and put yourself in the movie pretty easily, because 2 performers never share a shot.
Exactly.
So I like that idea, and I thought,
one of the advantages of your film is you can get actors that we have seen in other contexts.
Yeah.
Do things that other films don't allow them to do. So, I mean, Jason Schwartzman goes to places in this film.
Yeah.
Did you allow him to do so? The time and just on him as an actor, he's been in some great films, but those films don't go, of course, as far as that's really.
I was so lucky to have him, and he was the first one we shot with, so he was really our guinea pig for this process, and was so engaged and so helpful, and so had so much faith in our crazy thing. So I have an immense debt of gratitude to him. And yeah, as you say, I mean, I thought it was I was very excited about him in this role, because in some ways it kind of plays off of a persona that he's developed or that people are familiar with, but I hope we get to take it to places that people haven't seen him go before. And I do think it is really, there's a kind of, there's a depth to it, and there's a kind of self-loathing to that character for sure, but he's, it's also just kind of an extraordinary comic performance. He is really an amazing comic actor.
Oh yeah. What do you see as if any, the differences between sort of quote unquote dramatic or serious performance and comic performance? Because you just now you described these as different modes.
Yeah.
Do you what are your thoughts on that? If any?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, to me, they're intertwined, certainly, and I always feel like you can't be funny without being serious, and you can't be serious without being funny. I mean, I think my favorites maybe have aspects of both going at all times, and it's just kind of where on that what's the word spectrum, where in that spectrum you're going to lean. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, but I think when I say a comic performance, I mean, there are great comic actors who kind of always go for the laugh, and or the people with the deep improv backgrounds, and like Saturday Night Live people. I mean, there are people who just have a particular extraordinary talent to always find a laugh.
I see.
And what I think is, and I admire that hugely, it's kind of rarely what I haven't really had a use for that exactly in my movies, but I think that skill, you can take that same skill set, and if you just kind of point it away from punchlines, those can be the most electrifying actors, or I don't know, someone like Robert Downey, who with just that electricity he always had, and I think still has, although I haven't kept up with all the Marvel stuff, but he's someone I think of as having that same kind of like comic intensity, but he can deploy it for anything. And so I think that's certainly, I felt like we were getting at some of that with Schwartzman, is like taking these great honed comic instincts, and he's doing it, but there's not always a punchline. Sometimes he's just floating in existential space, but with that kind of aliveness.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, that's just one very important, but still one aspect of this feature, this picture. It's just it's So anything else you want to talk about in terms of post-production or production, or anything that comes to your mind that's important to you? Or
well, I mean, yeah, it's a tough project. It was even though it's in some ways quite simple, it's kind of, for the vast majority of the movie, it's just shot, reverse shot, reverse shot, and it seems like it should be easy, and it is. It's easy-ish, but being locking myself into these formal constraints that we had to shoot so much material to try to make sense of it. So perversely, for such a simple movie, it's, I had about 80 hours of material, which I'm sure is the most I've ever had. And so definitely I was, locked in this room, editing for many, many months and trying to find it and make sense of it.
Well, if you think about it, that's like you going back to your documentary Rob Moss roots, right? In a way.
Everything is, yeah.
Right. I mean, so there's a sense in which there's, again, it's something totally new conditions, pandemic, but this very old, not just Rob Moss, but the MIT, the epoch and that. But that's always been part of your, I think, part of your style, I think, right? If you want to talk about that, that would be great. But yeah, but I know that's something that's part of you, not just.
Oh yeah, I drank that. I drank Kool-Aid. A lot of that Kool-Aid. As you meant, Rob Moss was one of my teachers at Harvard when I was there as an undergrad.
Yeah.
Dick Rogers, Alfred Gazzetti, Ross McElwee. There was a whole crew there. And documentary was really the backbone of that program. They've had great narrative filmmakers there as well, and I was lucky to study with Ackerman, Dusan Makaveyev. I was incredibly lucky to be there when I was, and to have the mentors that I did. And Ackerman and Makaveyev, for all they don't have in common, one thing they do have in common is that they both had a pretty fluid sense of narrative and documentary. They worked in both, and they were taking from both, and
right.
And so I think that was really it informed everything I know about filmmaking. Yeah. To me, what's interesting about filmmaking is the documentary aspect. Even when you're making a tightly controlled narrative, you can't control everything, and you shouldn't control everything. And if it's going to be good, a lot of what is good about it is going to come from the uncontrolled aspects.
The unknown. The unknown, the mysterious aspect of human existence. Yeah, itself. I mean,
yeah.
I'm just thinking now, you must be somewhat affected or interested in Chantal Ackerman, who I was watching her films 25, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. You study with her, and she's at the top of Sight and Sound, greatest film. You must.
It's amazing, yeah.
What's your impression of that? Is it late to the party, but it's still the party? But yeah, it's.
It's fun. I mean, I know I can only imagine that she would have had some kind of disdain for that whole process.
Sure.
While also concurring with their results.
Okay.
I'm sure she would be pleased to be considered the maker of the greatest film of all time.
That's remarkable, right? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, it is. It's strange times we live in, but not all bad.
Not all bad. Yeah, I mean, does that mean you think there's an evaluation in the larger culture, or reevaluation about what a movie is in a philosophic sense, if that occurred, or do you think it's just I guess I'm wondering, could that happen, or would that happen? And if it did happen, would that be good or bad, or both? You know what I mean? Sort of that's
I think everything's up for grabs. I mean, you're asking the kind of the big questions now, but I feel like you and I both probably grew up with this idea of a canon and a hierarchical canon, and this is, and it's not that I ever put too much faith in any of that, or Citizen Kane is the all-time greatest, Vertigo is the all-time great. Like I love Citizen Kane, I love Vertigo. I never had anything invested in them being at the top of the mountain and everything else. And there's always been plenty of debate about these things, and yet I think there was this sense, and we're not just talking about filmmaking now, we're also talking about an entire culture, obviously. Filmmaking is the least of it. An entire culture that's in extraordinary upheaval, and all kinds of received ideas are floating away. And so it's like a very exciting time to be around and to be, but it's also terrifying because, of course, a lot of it is when things are unstable, you have a lot of battles, and you have a lot of people, fighting over territory, and who knows? I mean, I think people.
Yeah, I mean that's the more political aspect of it, I guess.
But I think it's. I mean, it is political, of course, but it's also just cultural. It's also
interesting. Yeah.
This sense, I think, of like, who no one really knows what's important anymore. No one really knows what's bedrock anymore. And we'll see.
Well, my podcast is humble and homely, I guess, as it is invested in the notion that these things are kind of knowable. That artistic quality is at a minimum base knowable. That it's not totally random and capricious.
Right.
That something there. Mm-hmm. But it's also predicated on a profound egalitarianism. Actually, I've talked about television and pop things and things that are very, very rare and esoteric, and embracing both. So I don't know if that perspective is in keeping with the times or not. I don't know. I sort of feel like, I don't really know. It's I guess it's a short way of saying that there's the notion that there's no bedrock or there's nothing to hold on to. I think for me that the arts matter is what you can hold on to, and it's to me a secondary question. How you evaluate, right? I think, yeah. But evaluation is, I'm somebody that doesn't like to live in dramatic times.
No, me neither.
I mean, I really hate it, actually.
Uh-huh.
I'm so in love with the quotidian and so in love with smallness. And I feel like I'd much rather be living in an age with no major world wars and no, upheaval and debate. So, and there's a sense in which this is, when I say this, it offends a lot of people because they feel like I'm being sort of selfish, because I guess either because they're unconscious of how much they are suited for such times, right? If they're an activist, for example. But I'm aware that there's different personality types, and you can live in an age, like I feel like I'm living in an age to which I'm not very well suited and doesn't sit right on me. And I'm aware of that, and I have to mindful that, of course, nevertheless, I live in it and do right. But I'm just wanting somebody that really relishes it, like a cultural warrior, or somebody that has a sense of what should be taught in schools or not. They may find the situation not frustrating because they're losing, but exhilarating because they love the drama of it. I'm sure there are folks like that. That's not me. Yeah. You're saying that you're closer to me. I don't know. Actually, everybody's a spectrum.
Oh yeah, for sure. No. I'm a peace-loving fellow for sure, and I don't. Yeah. Culture war is not my idea of fun.
Yeah. So, but that's what's going on around us now. So it's just
for sure
interesting. Maybe that's in this latest film. There's a little bit of that, I think, in your film.
Well, I'm reacting to it and feeling. I don't know that. I don't know that it's part of the text per se, but certainly it affects. I mean, every artist I know of every sort has to grapple with this one way or another now, because it's you can't not. I mean, what is that? Leonard Cohen has the. So many great songs, but There Is a War. You remember that one? Yeah. He's got the song, and there is a war between men and women. There's a war between rich and poor. There's a war between those who think there is a war and those who think there isn't. I think that's I'm misquoting, but
that's very true.
Yeah, it's like you can't not be in the war.
Really,
it's not optional.
It's not optional. Interesting. I have to grapple with that. I don't know what.
Me too.
Say more. That's an interesting. Say more about that. You can't. So it's not an option because of existence, or because of social existence, or how because of what's at stake, or is it
because it's a war, because it's all encompassing. Uh-huh. It's and it's interesting how it kind of came because I think for a long time. Again, I think a couple decades ago there was the sense that the arts play by their own rules, and like everything is justified in art. You can go and or that and I always kind of bought into this. I think the idea that like the social responsibility of the artist is to make good art, right? I mean, if you make something that means something to people and it's worthwhile, then it kind of can be anything. And I still essentially believe that, but now
I guess
now we're kind of on the battleground.
Interesting.
So you can't opt out of being on a battleground.
Interesting. And that takes a lot of forms, right? I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
What are the battle lines? If it's a battleground, what do you think of the forces that are in combat, if that's the metaphor?
Well, I don't know. I
I
mean,
really don't know. I mean, yeah,
because there's so many factors to this, and I can't untangle all of it. But you're
sure.
talking about, I think movies,
Yeah,
and maybe this is true of all arts, but movies in particular, like, they're very much you're 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 on cultural ground and technological ground and economic ground, and all those things have shifted wildly
interesting.
and I guess have been shifting wildly all along. It's not like you could find,
Yeah.
I mean, I can complain about how much it's changed in 20 years, but I don't know that you could find any 20-year
Right.
period in the movies where things didn't change hugely. Um, so, I think as all that stuff moves and shifts, we also are in an age where we're glutted with quote unquote content.
Right.
And that changes things to some extent when there's kind of infinite possibility. And then, and then there become these questions about, like, well, what stories,
To tell.
yeah, and what stories are worth telling, or what stories are acceptable to tell, or what stories, have been told too much. So we got to stop telling them.
Thank you very much. You've now hit upon, because I was a little puzzled at first, but that's why that's why there is objectively a battle. So you're saying when you have a glut of stuff, that's when it becomes, I won't say indispensable, I'll say inevitable, that you're going to have to weed some stuff out and make some tough choices. And maybe that's the battle. It's kind of a battle, I guess. I hadn't thought.
I don't know. I'm talking myself. There's this stuff goes so deep, and there's so many things going on at once that I don't mean to reduce anything to anything too simple, because I don't think any of it's simple. But I do think, I think there are hard questions to be asked and addressed about what's worth doing with this medium right now, and what's needed with this medium right now. I mean, Lord knows, as far as the content goes, like most of it feels, I can't get out of bed in the morning and say the world needs another movie. It doesn't. But I still want to be able to contribute something, of course. Like, you want to make something, you make these things for use. It's like making a table or a chair. You want someone to use it for something.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, Hindemith's work a lot. The composer Hindemith had an idea of use music, actually. And music for use. So did Kurt Weill, actually. Come to mind, but the idea that an artwork is for like a table, or like a, that's very foreign to my view of it, I suppose. But maybe I should come around to that. I don't know. It's just doesn't sit right with me because
well, what would the alternative be?
So for me, all art is an expression of human interiority, and it's taking that human interiority and making an object out of it, extracted from daily life. That could be a performance, that could be this piano, right? And that thing that you extract from it, that we call culture and art, is a way for us working out who we are and asking better questions and answering questions. That for me is actually what art is. Now, I see where utility might play a role in that, but that's a little different than a utilitarian. So it's not really, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, I don't know. I have to work, but that would be if you're asking me, that's my.
Well, you may just be having a deeper read on this than I mean, to me, that is a use. that is a utility, right? I mean,
okay, yeah, you're right.
You make the thing, and then you put it out there, and then somebody gets something out of it,
Right.
Whatever that is. I mean, that's, I'm not. I have no smaller or bigger purpose than that these things resonate for somebody and maybe mean something.
That makes sense. Well, there's also a question of mattering too, like what matters. I mean, there may be. I mean, I don't see myself as in a battle, but I would certainly, if somebody. I suppose I find myself fighting with other human beings that want to decide what matters and doesn't, and so maybe,
of course.
So maybe that's what the battle is about. But again, of course, there's hierarchy. I'm sure there's a hierarchy of mattering, right? I mean, if you're starving, there's things that matter, food. I mean, there's different, but I'm not sure we can quantify that. And so I'm not sure we can quantify that in ways that any side of a battle would think you can quantify it. And that may be the trick, right? So
yeah, I'm certainly inclined to agree with you there. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you make these judgments, but I mean, there would be people who fight over it. Ultimately, the culture will kind of work it out on its own, one way or another. I mean, we'll see what lasts in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, and I have no idea. I don't think anybody does.
That could be a technological thing too, right?
That's a huge part of it, for sure.
What role do you think technology plays in all that? If you,
I don't know. I mean, I do wonder. I've had this nagging fear in the back of my head that to a large extent maybe internet connectivity has kind of itself taken the place of some of what art used to be necessary for. When you can kind of connect to everything all the time in this very kind of clumsy and dumb way.
Yeah.
But does that serve some of the purpose for people that watching a movie or reading a book or seeing a performance or listening to music used to do? Because that used to be your connectivity outside of your home was through this kind of beautiful expression of something, and now it can be much more direct than that, which is quite interesting, but maybe less inspiring.
Well, my criticism of that would be that so if one wants to live in a world in which there aren't these extracted objects, works of art and culture, and that you replace that with just human relationship, is that what you're so on the internet or whatever? I think there's a reason why humans have never done that, or there's a reason why humans have heretofore not opted for that.
Sure.
And so I think there's a wisdom in that. So I would not like. So again, this is probably my bias. I mean, everybody. Look, we all have our biases. I'm not.
Yeah.
And so. Well, I guess my view is that art is sort of connected to religious faith,
Mm-hmm.
And, people in religions often are in religion for community, the church, for example, or the temple. But even those that's the most important thing will remind themselves that it's something greater than even that. That's idolatry, that there's this abstract. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. For me, the art function is kind of this sort of abstract, dare I say, metaphysical thing that transcends. In other words, it exists because you can't get it from your relationships or from society. Yeah.
Right. No, I agree.
Now, it would be very undesirable to live in a world where people forgot that. Now, we might be forgetting it now, I fear, because of the glut of content, possibly. That could cause people to lose sight of that. I mean, I can tell you in doing my podcast, I'm astonished and shocked to learn how unimportant art is to many people. I have learned that.
Sure.
Through doing this. It's amazing to me.
Well,
I didn't know this, and naive me, silly me, but I thought, I think entertainment's very important to them, but I'm not sure it might be more entertainment, to put it that way, than art per se. But I don't know. Maybe that'll change, and it's hard to get a read too, because you might have thoughts about it. But
no, I don't know. I mean, I have the same question. Do you think entertainment is a separate discipline from art, or are they intertwined? And
no, they're not separate. What I mean is that the people for whom art is unimportant or not as important, which is something I'm learning about, that they make an exception for the popular arts. So in other words, that's not important, but the new Marvel film might be very, very important or something,
Sure.
And so in a way, it's a backhanded compliment saying, well, at least they are honoring art, but it's a very small sliver. And that's not good either, right? So, and actually, that's not only not good, that's in keeping with them having forgotten about art's specialness, that they're trying to replace it with intimacy or relationship. It's the question of the real world, like what is the real world, right? And it's the question Hannah Arendt talks about, especially in The Human Condition, where she says that, Hannah Arendt says that cognition and thought are separate. They're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we think thinking is cognition, thinking is just that's why she could say Eichmann didn't think. So for her, thinking is not just stuff in your mind. Thinking automatically has to involve compassion, regard. In other words, she has a very narrow definition of thinking.
Uh-huh.
An accurate definition, actually. I think that's how we should. But I'm saying, it's kind of like that. It's like art isn't just, in that sense, it's not just utility. So she would come down hard on you. I mean, I'm not, but I'm just saying
Sure.
she
Yeah.
thought that the very definition of art is that it's not utility. And
Uh-huh.
if you try the human condition, she goes to great. She thinks that that's one of the mistakes Marx makes, by the way, is the confusion of the two. But that's just her being a German Jew, right? That's her being. I'm sure if she were John Dewey, who grew up in a more Anglophone world. See, I think part of it's culture. I think in this culture now, we're in America, we're in the U.S. In the U.S., we still think what you're getting at. What get to it. We like use. I mean, we want to know how our money's spent, and it's a very. That's cultural. Maybe that's changing. I've talked too long. I'm sorry, but I just
no.
On this.
It's all how you frame it, obviously, but it's interesting to me to think about what is and isn't useful, because on the one hand, Lord knows, I mean, the one thing that everything I've ever done has in common is that nobody asked for it. So in that sense, like, of course, it's kind of, when I say I make these things for use,
mm-hmm.
I'm not fulfilling a need in the market. The market never asked for them.
Never. Right.
I'm kind of going outside the market, and yet, this even if we say no, this isn't, this is, well, I'm not going to entertain you. I'm not going to give you anything you ask for, anything you want, but you're going to get something out of it. Like, to me, that's still useful, or I hope that's useful, or I aspire to be useful. I don't want to just, wash over you and be pointless. I mean, I can be pointless, but I want to be pointless in a way that's
useful.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that in this conversation, you have a very broad, expanded definition of use, probably one that.
It's because I'm desperate to be useful, Yeah. It's you don't want to. As far as exploring interiority, like I'm not interested enough in myself, I think, to just want to make a lifetime out of, pulling out the innards and saying, here you go. I don't just want to be cat dropping the mouse on your doorstep and saying, you should thank me for this.
Right. But when I say when I use the word interiority, I have certain associations that might not be another person. So, for example, I don't mean introspection necessarily, by the way. So by interiority, I basically mean what makes me different in this table.
Yeah.
And actually what makes me different from AI, actually, even though some disagree. It's basically undergoing experience, having emotions, being human. That's my take on what it means to be human. I think that is important. And I think art is about that. Now, that's a very general, maybe too general, but it works for me. I don't, if you want to, and so within that, I'm sure there will be disagreements and sure among people. But it seems to me your films get at the heart of that, which is one of the reasons I think why you've had the impact you've had in film and over many years. And so that's formidable. And I think that's, certainly important to people.
Well, the movie is not done until somebody. I always feel that the audience is kind of the final collaborator, and the by far the the least predictable collaborator for sure. But I don't. The movie's not a movie until somebody's received it on the other end.
Absolutely, and you've always felt that when you go into a project, and
of course,
Andrew, is there anything else you want to talk about or think about before we, or say about there, or anything you want
cognate about? No, but it's a very strange movie. It's an interesting, unique experience for all of us who did it, and it's kind of had a tough road out there because it is so weird. But I'm
really.
Yeah, but what I'm hoping,
like when I thought this is going to be a hit, and it's not, isn't it? You don't think it's going to catch on and be this hit? I mean,
well, it's certainly not a hit by any conventional metrics, but what I hope, in a way, and being perverse as I am, the fact that we did kind of fly as under the radar as we did, means that it's still lying out there to be discovered. So however people find their way to it, whenever they find their way to it, I hope it's something that again will continue to be of use for years to come. And I'm excited to have it out there in hiding if need be.
But you're doing this big release, physical release, and
doing a physical release, which is also, I mean, that's a whole other topic, right? But in the age of everything being ephemeral and non-physical, it's you see how quickly things can be disappeared. So it's nice also to know that it will be there in some physical form for somebody.
I haven't read any reviews of it or seen any press on it at all.
That's the thing.
There hasn't been, or I don't know. I wouldn't know.
No, there's been some, but it's been, it's just, again, very, very glutted market, very weird project.
Huh. I would think that the pandemic / curious part of the project would make it, again, would be one of the things, right, that would make it big. But I don't know. Again, I'm one person.
We'll do the final account. 500 years.
500 years. That's
yeah. I'm on the Shakespeare clock.
The Shakespeare clock.
Although he managed to be successful in his own time, so he was ahead of me on that one.
I feel you're successful, Andrew, and I appreciate you taking the time amidst all this to talk about your film There.
Thank you so much.
Where should people get it and watch it, and how? What do you?
Great question. Well, Magnolia is our distributor. They're putting out the DVD, Excellent. But it will also be for those of you who want the convenience of VOD. God bless you. It should be available on all your providers, Amazon and Apple and so forth. It's already available. I believe the price goes down on February 14th. It goes from whatever the expensive VOD is to the less expensive VOD. So it is out there.
It's out there. The truth is out there. You're out there. This film is out there, and thanks very much, Andrew, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you, Mitch. You too.
To be continued.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.